First of all, welcome everybody to the webinar today. We're going to be focusing on 3 things that you can focus on during your job search in 2026. So we're covering about 3 things there. First of all, I'd just like to hand over to Nikki and Kirsty from McLaren Recruitment, and they'll get us started. Nikki and Kirsty.
Cool. Thank you, Craig. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Just a few quick housekeeping things before we get started. If everyone could please keep their cameras and their mics turned off, that would be great. So as Craig said, I'm Kirsty McLaren. Joining me from McLaren Recruitment is Nikki Walshaw. Wave, Nikki, yeah. We run McLaren Recruitment, which specialises in recruitment at all levels, from admin to chief executive and everything in between. We work across all sectors and are particularly well known for our experience and expertise in the not-for-profit NGO space. Joining us today is Craig McAlpine, Kyla Hindle, Wendy McPhail and Gordon Holmes. They're from MyCareerBrand. Since 2011, MyCareerBrand has been delivering career coaching, including career transition and outplacement, career direction, onboarding, CV writing, LinkedIn and job search strategy. Craig, Kyla, Gordon and Wendy combine decades of expertise with the latest in AI and contemporary research to provide practical, personalised coaching. They are engaged by both employers and individuals throughout New Zealand and overseas, with most of their clients coming through referrals, which is a testament to their success in delivering great outcomes.
Cool. And as you know, I should say, today's webinar is about 3 critical areas every job seeker needs to focus on in order to find, secure and succeed in the right role. So the things we're going to cover: a brief job market update to start with, Locus of Control, so where you should and shouldn't focus your energy, why targeted job search beats the scattergun approach, how to use AI intelligently, and then wrapping up with a Q&A session at the end. Before we hand over to the team at MyCareerBrand, I'd like to provide that brief job market update. So the headline is this: the market is more active than it was a year ago, but confidence remains mixed. We've seen improved hiring momentum over recent months, with SEEK's latest March data showing that job ads are up 13% year on year, which is continuing the strongest growth trend in more than 3 years. That tells us that demand has returned in parts of the market and the recovery is continuing, which is great news. At the same time, though, unemployment remains elevated at 5.4% and labour force participation is high. In simple terms, there are still a lot of people actively competing for roles. However, there is some encouraging movement for job seekers. SEEK reports that applications per job ad fell 2.8% month on month, marking the 6th consecutive monthly decline. So while competition remains strong overall, it is easing from the peak levels that we saw last year, which is also good news.
Latest labour market data also suggests that employers remain cautious. Fewer organisations are planning headcount growth, but importantly, they're not moving to widespread reductions either. So instead, more are choosing to hold steady, maintaining current team size while they wait for clearer economic signals. Business confidence has softened too. The number of organisations expecting economic growth over the next 12 months has dropped from 54% last quarter to 44%, while expectations of negative growth have risen sharply. And that caution is obviously understandable. Ongoing geopolitical tensions, including the war overseas, global trade uncertainty, and broader cost pressures continue to flow through to business decision making here in New Zealand. Even when domestic conditions improve, those external factors can make employers slow to commit to permanent hiring. So the short version is this: the market is active but selective. Hiring is happening, but employers remain cautious and candidates still need to stand out. For employers, it means there is talent available, but top candidates in growth areas will still have options. So for job seekers, that means clarity, relevance and positioning matter more than ever. So talking to this today is MyCareerBrand, who will talk you through those tangible things that you can be doing now as part of your job search. So over to you guys.
Great. Just before we kick off, Gordon, I just wanted to let people know that we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you do want to type in any questions as we go, please do so. And then Nikki and Kirsty will read those out. So don't wait till the end to get your questions in. Kick them off as soon as you can. Thank you. Wendy first. Wendy.
Right. I'd really like to just pick up on what we just listened to there about having been clear about what we want, being relevant about it, and wanting the positioning. We talk here about the locus of control, so where you should and shouldn't focus your energy. Now, this concept came about back in 1966 with a guy called Julian Rotter, who was a psychologist. But it was focused on then around having an internal locus around the things that if you took action on that you had control over. But it was brought to life by Stephen R. Covey back in 1989 when he released a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And this model changed significantly. So it evolved into 2 concentric circles. So if you've got a pen and a paper there, I suggest that you actually draw yourself 2 concentric circles. Center of the circle is what we call the circle of influence. What is it that you can actually influence and bring about change to? On the outside circle, it's a circle of concern. Now, this is particularly important when it comes to looking at job search. It might be that your role is being discontinued. It might be that you've been in the market for a long period of time. It might be that you're wanting to make a change. If you're thinking long and hard about these 2 circles, what have you got influence over that you can control? So if thinking about your collateral, have you got it prepared properly? Is your CV of the standard that you would want? Is it linked to yours LinkedIn? Are you going back to recruiters or post interviews and actually saying, hey, thank you very much, really interested, or whatever it might be in that sense? In that circle of influence, we really recommend that you actually write down the things that you have control over. And they're things like, the relationships, your thoughts, your actions, your ability to actually, I often say mind over mattress in the morning, get out of bed. It might be go for the run, go for the walk. But what can you do to grow that circle of influence? Versus sitting out there in your circle of concern where there are many things that concern us, but we don't have direct control over. All right. So we can't actually influence what happens to us geopolitically, economically as such, the fuel price, but we can spend a lot of time concerned in that space. And that's not what we want to happen, because if we actually spend too much time out there, that circle of influence shrinks. So what we're wanting you to do is to grow that circle of influence. What can you do today or tomorrow? Good example, worked with someone over the past 6 or 7 months whose job was disestablished when the business was purchased, made a decision to actually leave Auckland and move to a rural centre, moved to a place she had absolutely no friends, no acquaintances, no network whatsoever. And so set about a strategy of saying, right, what can I do to actually create that? What have I got influence over in this time in order to help me find a job? Now, she sought a lot of help from people in Auckland before she left, but she got some really helpful hints about, getting a CV together and actually talking to the right people. She also got some really unhelpful things around, you need to be making 10 to 20 phone calls a day minimum. So she got into this place of, what sits out there? What am I concerned about? What can I influence? So she stepped back from it and said, right, here's my search. This is what I'm going to do. And she's actually landed herself a very successful job, essentially by sitting there and saying, what can I manage? What can I influence in that centre? Who do I need to go and speak to? Who haven't I spoken to? Who's important in this area? Who's got connections? And that's how the job originally came about. And then the offer has subsequently come. So I think this is really critical as we move into, Gordon's going to talk to us about, less is more. But first and foremost, what sits in the area that you can control? That locus control sits right in the center of the circle of influence, but that circle of influence actually demonstrates how and what we should have growing instead of actually being concerned over and seeing it all shrink around us. So I know that it works. And we've seen that it works. Those people, one of the easiest ways to determine circle of control and circle of influence, circle of control is around how people use language. You'll find people working in their circle of influence speak positively. Okay, they might be unhappy inside. They might actually be concerned. However, they take a positive view on life. People who are sitting outside in that circle of concern and shrinking their circle of influence are often the naysayers. They're negative about everything. So listen to the language around you and you'll be quite surprised. And firstly and foremost, think about yourself. What can you have influence over? Over to you, Gordon.
Thanks, Wendy. Hello, everyone. It's really tempting to think when you're approaching a job search that if you send out lots of job applications, eventually one of those will land, that it's a numbers game. But that's not how the job market works. And what we know is that if you send out lots and lots of applications, you will fail to get cut through and get noticed for the right reasons. And as Wendy has said, where you focus your energy is important. You can't control the job market, but you can control your focus and be targeted in your job search. And career coaches and recruiters alike recommend that you do take a targeted approach to your job search. One thing to know is that people that are scattergun with their different applications are noticed by recruiters. They are called habitual job applicants, and there's a risk that you compromise your brand if you're seen as a regular applicant to every job that's going, thinking that one of them will eventually land. Alternatively, recruiters also notice the people that are sparing with their applications. They put them in occasionally and they send in very well written CVs and cover letters. So you want to be noticed for the right reasons. Taking a targeted approach takes some pressure off your search as well. If you send out a lot of applications with a scattergun approach, you'll get a lot of declines. And if you get a lot of declines, that can contribute to anxiety. Whereas if you take a targeted approach, you'll feel much more in control. So how do you take a targeted approach? The first thing is to identify the targets. So think about what sectors you want to work in or industries, what organisations within those sectors and industries, and then what specific roles do you want to target. And you can call this your ideal next role. Then you're ready to go to market. So the first area you can go to are job boards, such as Seek and LinkedIn. And don't be put off that you see a lot of people applying very quickly to those job boards. You can get a bit anxious about that, but the likelihood is that those are generic applications, they haven't been tailored, and that they won't get cut through. And we also know that many people that do apply quickly may not be eligible to work in New Zealand. So don't be too concerned if you see quick applications made there. The second place that you can target your applications to is identifying recruiters who work in the sector or specialise in the types of roles that are of interest to you. So proactively approach them. And if you want some great tips on how to do that, Kyla has written 2 great posts, one yesterday and one the previous week, and that will give you great tips on how to do that. The third area you can target then are organisations of interest to you, their career website. So register there and receive alerts to jobs that might be of interest to you there. And you can also approach them proactively. Another area to be mindful of is the number of jobs that are not advertised and sit within the hidden job market. In New Zealand, the hidden job market represents something like 70 to 80% of vacancies. These are not advertised. These are filled through relationships and connections. So your job search, when you target it, needs to target all the different channels to market: the job boards, the recruitment firms, the organisation career websites, and the hidden job market. So to target the hidden job market, you need to do lots of networking. You can do a thing called informational interviews, where you're asking people for information, not a job. And there's a saying that if you ask for a job, you get advice, but if you ask for advice, you get a job. So use that as another way to target the hidden job market. And when you're talking to people, always ask at the end, is there anyone else that I should be talking to? And if somebody is recommended, then ask for an introduction to them. So those are the channels to market. And then once you've identified target roles, then do thorough job due diligence about those roles. And then you can make a go, no-go decision as to whether you're actually going to apply for the role or not. And deciding not to apply for a role is still progressing your job search. I had a client last year who had been sending out lots of scattergun applications, and she realised in hindsight that that wasn't the most effective way to go to market. And she became more targeted and received 2 concurrent job offers at the same time and took one of those 2 jobs. So it does work. When applying for roles, always do talk to the recruiter or hiring manager beforehand, gather more information, get answers to your questions, including if there's a preferred candidate and the remuneration. Remember to sell yourself, build rapport with the person you're talking to, because people buy from people. And use all the information that you've gathered to tailor your CV and cover letter. Address how you can solve the organisation's challenges and problems, and provide evidence of where you've done this previously. So taking a targeted approach to your job search rather than a scattergun approach helps you to feel more in control, uses your time and energy more efficiently and effectively, frees you up to be more proactive, to build relationships and leads, and increases the likelihood of securing a new job, and sooner rather than later. So now we'll look at how AI can help you with your job search.
Thanks, Gordon. Okay, so there's been a lot of negativity in the media about AI in recruitment, and we wanted to present a bit of a different perspective. I also really wanted to talk to this because I'm definitely not someone that's an early adopter of anything technical. So I wanted to explain this in a way that I would understand if I was hearing it for the first time, as I'm conscious that we'll have people on the call with a range of confidence with AI. This particular suggestion, using AI as an aggregator for job boards, can save so much time and so much energy for job seekers, and it's actually really accessible for everyone. So what this problem solves in New Zealand terms is that most job seekers will check Seek, they'll check LinkedIn, possibly even Trade Me Jobs, but they'll often miss roles that are posted directly on company career pages. And they might see the same job reposted 3, 4, 5 times on Seek, on LinkedIn, and then on the organizational career page. They'll have to wade through job ads that look relevant but aren't. And an AI aggregator can fix this by collecting the jobs for you, removing a lot of the noise. And if you have spent time explaining what you do and don't want and why, it can even explain which jobs are actually a good fit. So how it works is it collects jobs from New Zealand sources. So instead of you visiting 5, 6, 7 websites, the tool can check all these sites for you. So it will check Seek, it will check LinkedIn jobs, it will check company career pages, so the banks, the councils, the startups, the NGOs. You don't do all the searching, the tool does that. What it will also do is clean up the job ads. Job ads are non-uniform, let's say, and they're often messy. There's so much ambiguity in job titles, and AI will rewrite them into a standard format so that jobs will look comparable instead of completely chaotic. It will also remove the duplicates. So you might see that same job ad on Seek, on LinkedIn, on the company website. The tool will recognize that these are the same role, so you'll only see it once with the best link. And then AI can also compare the job to you, which is a key difference from the regular job boards. So you will give the tool your CV or your LinkedIn profile. You'll go through what your preferences are. So you'll say, I want a job in Auckland, or I want to work remotely. This is the salary range that I'm interested in working in. I want a permanent role, or I want a contract role. I'm interested in these industries, and I'm not interested in these industries. What you don't want is also really important. And I will then ask, how close is this job to this person, and can score each job. So assuming you've loaded your script with the do's and the don'ts, it will be able to predict whether you're a strong match, whether it's a bit of a stretch, or whether you're a poor fit. So you will then get a short kind of human summary. So instead of reading 2 pages of waffle, you'll see the title, the location, the work type, whether it's hybrid or in office. You'll see some bullet points around why it's a good fit for you and some bullet points around what they need. So it allows you to make that decision as to whether to move forward or not much more quickly in kind of 30 seconds as opposed to 10 minutes. This works well in New Zealand because our job markets are small, there's a lot of repetition, it's very relationship driven, and it's full of very vague titles. AI helps this by seeing past those kind of inflated or ambiguous job titles and really understanding where the skills overlap. It also catches hidden roles that might be advertised only on company sites, and will also highlight public sector versus private sector differences. So this is really powerful for anyone changing careers, anyone wanting to return to work after a period of absence, a migrant, or Kiwis that are returning to New Zealand after working overseas, or those trying to secure senior roles that have got fuzzy or ambiguous titles. What the tool won't do is auto apply for you. It can't guarantee interviews, and it can't replace your human judgment or the networking that you need to do as part of your job search strategy. But it absolutely can save you time, reduce your overwhelm, improve, I suppose, the quality of your decision making, and surface roles that could be a good fit for you based on role content. Over to you, Craig.
Sorry, Kyla, I've just had a few people in the chat asking what is the best AI tool for that. I thought it might be appropriate to touch on that now.
I'll
going
cover
into
that
that?
off. Yeah, I'll cover
Okay.
that off now. So
Totally good.
yeah, I noticed a few questions coming on, and Kyla described it as a tool. It absolutely is a tool, but the tool is actually created by yourself. Now, I think it's really important when you're using AI, actually, whether it's for jobs or general research, is to be really precise in what your queries are. And I'll cover this off in the next slide because, as Kyla mentioned, there's going to be all sorts of levels of capability out there with AI. I spend a lot of time on AI myself, but others may only have scratched the surface or not at all. So just coming back to it, defining the role precisely is important. The job title, the seniority. And so when we talk about the tool, it's actually putting these prompts into Copilot. I noticed somebody asked on the chat, what is the best tool to use? We've all got different AI tools that we are using. It could be ChatGPT, could be Claude, it could be Office 365 and ChatGPT. Obviously, ChatGPT is the probably the one that kicked off first, but Office 365 Copilot comes with your Office subscription anyway. So you've got it there, have a play with it. But be precise, specify locations, inclusions and exclusions. So that's what we mean by precise. So for example, Auckland CBD only. Set your salary bands. So when you're writing the queries, and don't worry about remembering all this on my next slide. I've got it there and it'll be all available in the recording. Include your target industries. So be explicit. Include and or exclude. Limit the results. So, you don't want 240,000 jobs dating back, to 1973. So actually we didn't have job boards then, but let's go back to 2000. So anyway, so I know they were there because I was involved in them. But so you want to be precise. You don't want to have the overwhelm that Kyla's talking about, that you're actually trying to remove. So make sure you don't be overwhelmed by this. Request deduplication. Kyla touched on it. And so she was saying that, it'll sort out, the jobs that are the same, only mention them once or whatever, or depend on your criteria. But you have to specify that in your script, which I'll be covering off shortly. Attach pitch reference files. So we've got a tool called Pitch, which fits into what Kyla was talking about. The tool actually provides for you an ideal role, which you actually use and you define and pitch. It'll have your CV, it'll have your achievements, your competencies, and your skills, and your strengths, and you can use all of that output, and I'll cover that off in more detail shortly. But it's really important that you attach or include in the script the information that you want it to cover off. So look, I know that the text on this is quite small, but I needed to fit it in, and where you'll get access to this is on the MyCareerBrand website under Great Resources, Past Webinars. Within the next few days, we'll be posting the recording of this, and you can just go towards the end of the recording if you don't want to go all the way through it and find this and have a look at it, then take a snapshot of the screen and just use it as a guide. But basically, and repeating what Kyla was saying, it acts as your labour market research assistant. So if I had, for example, Copilot, anybody open up Copilot, you'll see that you've got a little prompt screen or box down there, and you can type in these prompts into there to actually, for it to become your assistant tool for job search. You can use attached files as well, but be aware that most AI tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, and so on will only allow you to attach up to 3. So attach the 3 that are really important up front, and then you might add another file of information after it to try and draw out that specification. So the attached roles might be the ideal role specification. Okay, so if you make a specification for your role, your achievements, the benefits or outcomes that you've delivered, your competencies bank, and as I say, these will be developed in a tool that we've got at MyCareerBrand called Pitch. Current CV, so that's always really helpful because it gets the context of what you've done in the past as well. So you can bring that in. Look, you might also want to include, hey, look, I've seen this job ad. Pull up similar job ads to this, because you've got a job ad there that you really like. Why wouldn't you use that as a benchmark if you particularly liked it, and so on. Hey, look, something that I think is really important too in this is your script or your content that you're putting in should be targeted for where you want to be, not just where you've been. So think about putting in the role that I would like, because otherwise, guess what? It'll put you where you've been, the same job title, the same level, and so on. So think about, I'm seeking a role that would be the step up from my current role or my previous role. It would include. So be specific in that. It would not include making coffee for my manager, for example, or for Craig. Search instructions. So anchor the search criteria to the ideal role. Example job ad, as I referred to. Infer adjacent job titles. You know what? I have a thing about job titles. They don't necessarily actually represent what the job is. So if you go searching for a job title, guess what you're going to get? Just the jobs that are under that title. So this is where specifications and adjacency really, really helps. Look, and also exclude roles that are materially conflicting with your ideal role definition. So again, I would not like a role to be listed where, or do not include roles that are, and it might be a particular employer as well. Okay, so constraints. Score each role on X, Y, and Z. So put in those. Location, salary, seniority, time frame, and so on. Output, maximum. Kyla mentioned before, hey, look, this is about removing the overwhelm, not increasing it. So maybe you want to sort of narrow it down a bit and say, hey, look, I just want to look at the top 20 roles for this. Deduplicate, as Kyla mentioned, ranked with short explanation and fit, and contact details really important. You can actually include all of these. Just something I add just to close this off before we get into Q&A, that when you're doing this, you could also include at the top, please create, you don't have to use the word please, but it's nice, create a Microsoft Word formatted table file that I can download. Okay, and that will then give you the downloadable file for that. You don't have to copy and paste from Copilot or whatever it is. It'll actually give you a lovely formatted file, tabulated format and so on, that you can download. Now, for those of you that are really experienced AI users, you might choose to create your own agent. I'm not going to go into the detail because, as Kyla told me yesterday, she said, when you were talking about this, my eyes were just starting to glaze over. So, so I'm not going to get into all of that detail. But for those of you out there or on the webinar today, look, if you are using agents, agentic AI, give it a go. Write your own agent. Right. Okay. So that covers off that. There's probably going to be lots of questions and answers coming up. So we'll flick straight into that. Right. Nikki and Kirsty.
Yes, cool. Okay, I can start. First question from Andrew. Any comments breaking down hiring trends by age group? Are 55 plus job seekers doing better or worse at the moment? I personally haven't seen any data on the breakdown of age groups. I certainly know anecdotally that people in the 55 plus bracket are struggling. There certainly are stories out there in the media and on LinkedIn and things, but I haven't seen any data. Guys, seen anything?
I've been following this closely just recently, and I think I might have mentioned to some of my career brand team. And there's a journalist that I won't name who loves creating clickbait headlines, and there was a rant on that just this last week about ageism in the workforce. It's not just 55. Now, with AI coming in, what we're seeing is a degradation or a reduction in jobs that are being offered for grads as well. So it's now actually displacing potentially the handle tuning type sort of roles or the entry level roles. But that's, I think, a challenge to us to actually start thinking, okay, so what is it that I bring that is not available in AI, for example, that is going to be, doing those automated jobs? When you talk about being 55, often what we see, and I know Wendy, Kyla, and Gordon will see it, and so will you, Kirsty and Nikki, all the time, 25 years experience in X, Y, and Z, or 15 years, what does that mean? Okay, so immediately you've introduced ageism into your CV. What you need to be talking about is the experience that you've got and what that delivers. What does that actually mean? Often it can mean not for your employer, not learning on their coin. Okay, so that gold that you're able to bring to the table, then the being able to transfer your learning through to the other less experienced or less learned employees within that organization. So yeah, it's definitely there, but I think there's ways around it as well.
I'd just add that I've had clients in their 50s and 60s that have struggled with their applications, but when they've become increasingly targeted with their focus, they have had success in securing jobs. So sometimes it can feel like ageism, but it's actually an issue of target, because at that point in your career, you have a lot of experience and possibly across different sectors and different roles, and it can look too generalized. But when you target, then you're more likely to have success.
Yeah, I think it comes back to Wendy's point too, around the locus of control. Think about what you can control and what you can do to be able to adapt and evolve what that age, if you want to call it that, means. I've had people who are 35 or 25 have got a heck of a lot more to offer than some of the clients that we see, and Kirsty and Nikki, you'll see this as well, that have got 30 years experience simply because they haven't evolved or learned. So yeah, I think it's an interesting topic.
I think you can also influence the thinking here, because it comes back to that circle of influence. Is that if once again, if you have, and I see it, and we have success with older people. I mean, it's a number. Age is a number, and once again, it comes back to the influence and how you are actually thinking. You know, if you're going into, because we get dealt out here in our circle of concern, we get dealt up this, you know, it's difficult for the plus 55s or the 60-year-olds or whatever it might be. The reality is there is still a lot of work out there and people are getting those jobs. It might just be being done differently. It might be fractional work. It might be 30 hours a week or 20 hours a week. But it's just, and I really think sometimes if you're going in thinking you're old, then you're going to come across thinking you're old. So it's like, you know, you need to, I would be reframing and thinking, you know, why can't you be thinking like a 21-year-old? Because the reality is, if you've gone off and we've got some AI tools and we've got our collateral together, we've got the experience, we can actually be adding, what value are we bringing to an employer? I think we forget that sometimes. So.
Cool, thank you.
Dan has made a suggestion, which is a useful one. Also recommend to ask the AI to challenge your information. Ask it what recruiters or companies may ask, or trends and challenges that are in the market, and identify gaps in your own resources.
Yes, I would add to that. I don't trust anything that comes out of AI. And I always throw in the question, are you sure? Because I've heard differently. Just to challenge it. And sometimes it comes out, you're absolutely right, Craig. You know, so just extending on what Dan had said there. But yeah, absolutely, you know, the challenges and so on, it's really important too.
What are your thoughts on job seekers using AI to tailor their CV and cover letter?
Use with caution. Yeah, I think we see so many cover letters that come through that are AI generated, and they are all very similar to each other and follow the same formula. So if you're going to, and because of that, it becomes really obvious and very non-targeted and generic. So I think if you're going to use AI as an initial draft, that's not a bad idea, and it can help you summarize and collate the ideas into a general flow and a good theme. But then you really need to cast a critical eye over it and input all of your unique personal bits that really talk to who you are and the experience that you bring, and make it sound like it's original and written by you, because it is glaringly obvious, the AI generated ones, and they're becoming more and more prevalent, and it's they just come across as really generic now, even if they have been tailored apparently. Yeah.
Thank you. Someone has asked, how do you create your, sorry, I'll just get the actual question. How can I write my application to ensure it gets through AI screening?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're not really using AI screening, are we, Kirsty? And I think, we are going through each and every job application and reviewing it thoroughly and reading it. But I guess there are organisations that are starting to do this, and I'm not sure how effective it is. I think they're missing applicants by doing it. But I guess you want to focus on having the right keywords in there to make sure you're talking to the job ad and the job description, so that if it is going for an initial screen by AI, that's getting picked up and it's getting put into the pile for hopefully further consideration and reading by a human.
I think the guide is to use AI as an input, but to be the human that actually writes the content.
Yeah, the other piece of really good advice I've read actually from the New Zealand General Manager of Employment Hero, who was interviewed, and he was saying it's not, yes, important about the keywords or the words to Nikki, but it's also about outcomes, output, context. So making sure that you include that. And I know at My Career Brand, we're really strong on that. An achievement is not an achievement unless it's got an outcome. Otherwise, you're just doing your job. And so have the other 1,000 applicants that have written exactly the same using AI. So go back in there and humanize it.
I've had a few people that I've coached over the last few months as well who've come to us with CVs that are 2 pages long. And when you think about what Craig's just said about the context, the outputs, the outcomes, a 2-page CV will often not be not be enough not be enough content for your CV to be optimized well enough for those keywords to be picked up. So just making sure that you've got enough detail in your CV as well, and you're not trying to keep it to 2 pages.
Yeah, there will be some, and we've had it where recruitment consultants or search consultants have said, I don't want to see 4 or 5 pages, just give me 2. Okay, so that means that your first page actually has to be spot on, nail the role, be relevant, outcomes, what you're delivering, what's my story. Then the second page can be a summary of where you've been and what you've done. Okay, but yeah, if they do bring it back, and look, in the US it's 1 page, so I guess they've got a lot more people to play with over there. But it's a tough one.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions regarding roles that are advertised externally but ultimately go to internal candidates. There's a question as to why are organisations doing that, and another, how do I set myself apart from an internal pool?
Often organisations have a policy of going to market, so they may have developed internal candidates or encourage the internal job market, but have a policy to go and check. And so the challenge for job seekers is to try and tease out how much focus is on the preferred candidate, and is this a tick box size? If it is, it's wasting your time and their time. So try and differentiate that. Also think about if you're the external candidate, what can you bring that might be different from internal candidates? Have you worked across different sectors? Have you got learning agility from that? Can you bring different capabilities and demonstrate different outcomes that might differentiate from the internal candidates?
Thank you. Someone has asked, having ongoing health issues has made it hard for me to get back into the workforce. Any tips as to how to approach businesses when applying for roles?
Kyla and Wendy, you've had experience with clients with that challenge as well.
Certainly my experience on this one is to be honest and upfront. I think if you're actually applying for a role, if an employer is actually keen on you, you've got the skill set that's required, you can really add value. It's not something, oh, by the way, I need to let you know. It's actually, you need to front foot it. And my experience with this is that it hasn't actually negated people, people have been able to attain jobs. Obviously, every person's situation is different. So I think it's also dependent on, is it going to impact your ongoing ability to be on the job and to work in the job? So I think there are a number of considerations you have to take before you even apply for roles. Are you fully capable of working again? How has illness or something impacted your ability to do that job? And then front foot it right in the early instances.
Anything to add, Kyla? Or
No, I think you've covered it really nicely there, Wendy. I think, not waiting till you're offered the role. I think there are many things that can be managed if they're disclosed early and considered as part of the entire process. But if it's introduced right at the point of offer, often it feels a bit like a skeleton in the closet and can be much more tricky to navigate around. I think just introducing that early in the process.
I think this is a really important area, and I'd just like to add one thing there. And again, something that we really focus on for our clients is outcomes. If you can communicate, the outcomes that you deliver, then your health issues actually become there is no issue. You're still actually delivering what needs to be delivered. Whereas the other candidates who just go in blasé and think, well, I'm going to actually talk about my responsibilities and my achievements, and their achievements don't talk about outcomes. Actually, you're shining.
Thank you. This is an interesting one, and I think will generate some conversation. Fiona has said she's been doing all of the things that we've suggested today, including AI, without success until recently when she put a photo on her CV. So she put the photo on her CV, she's been shortlisted and had interviews, albeit jobs that she's well overqualified for but keen to pursue. I'm 48 and look younger for my age, apparently with lots of experience. Should I be wary of this?
I would say no. I would say if putting a photo on has actually generated a response and got you interviews, then I would stick with it. It's very much a personal preference about photos. I think
It's
size,
a really interesting topic because LinkedIn actually has your photo invariably on it anyway.
Exactly.
So what I would say is please don't do what a lot of real estate agents do, and that's put a photo on both that are actually 30 years old, and you meet them for the first time to sell your house and you think,
Been catfished.
I also think size matters. You're not wanting to take up, a significant part of the first page with your photo. Subtle, professional, obviously mirrors what's on LinkedIn and it's relevant and updated. I think I've been caught in that situation of going out to get someone to bring them in for an interview when I've been in CE roles and finding I'm not quite sure who I'm talking to because the person waiting out there bears no resemblance to the person that I'd actually had a look at on LinkedIn. So
an interview that I did recently with Ryan Bridge said, well, of course, he jokingly said, well, of course, he said, I would just have to put my photo on the CV and I'd be fine, I'd get the interview. That was Ryan Bridge saying that, and I thought, yeah, we probably would. But yeah, I think went to Wendy's point. I think, look, if it's working for you, great. We wouldn't normally suggest that because you're introducing bias, but look.
Positive bias, obviously, in this case.
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
We've had a couple of questions talking back to the reducing your CV down to a 1 or 2 pager. When you're over 50, how can you possibly do that? And also squeezing 40 years into 2 meaningful pages is hard. Is anything over 10 years actually valuable?
Again, it's targeted, and usually the last 10 to 15 years of your career are the most relevant for what you're going for. So we would recommend not going back further than that unless there's specific roles or industry or sector experience that's relevant for the role that you're going for. So generally with my clients, I say 4 to 5 pages is fine. And that's the norm in New Zealand, although as Craig referenced, some employers also want a shorter version, but I wouldn't be encouraging 1 pages as your only CV. At executive level, that can be sometimes requested, but it's perfectly fine to have 4 to 5 pages, but don't cover all your career. Again, it's targeted, it's relevant to the roles that you're applying for.
How can we combat thanks, but we think this job will not be a challenge for you, i.e. we think you're overqualified?
Well, I'd like to comment on that one too. I've encountered that a lot. I think we all have different ages and stages in our careers and reprioritize careers at different points in our lives. And so I think it's important that if you are considering a role at a level below what you've previously performed, that you articulate up front that you're seeking that and why you're seeking it. So it's providing the context. I know from an employer's perspective, they can be concerned that people will maybe have a chip on the shoulder performing at a lower level or just use it as a holding position before they race off to a bigger role. So I think it's about getting your story right and articulating why you are seeking a role at a different level and providing that information as you go in. Mm-hmm. So you're tailoring the message and being proactive about it.
Thank you. We've had a few questions along the lines of new immigrants to New Zealand. What advice do you have to help them land their first job and show the value of their previous international experience?
I can jump in again. I've coached a lot of people that have been new to New Zealand, and it can be challenging. I think it's again about being targeted. It's again about showing the relevance and the outcomes that you can deliver. You won't have the same extended network that somebody that's grown up in New Zealand, been to school, tertiary institutions and workplaces, but you can go and do informational interviews. You can start to build a network. You can leverage LinkedIn to do that. And I have seen many immigrants to New Zealand secure employment. It's just hard landing that first job, but once you have landed it, you're off and running.
I think also, just to, if I can add something to that, I think just recognizing that we're a small market here in New Zealand. So I've had a lot of, I've worked with job seekers in the past who've come here with this big global experience and feeling like it's really relevant, but actually it's not, or it's not immediately relevant to the New Zealand market. So I think just recognizing that we are a small little island and your global experience is impressive, but not necessarily completely relevant. So starting to understand how you can draw out your experience in a way that is going to be recognizable and valuable to smaller local employers is really helpful.
Yes, it's that question. I like Kyla, have also had clients who've done really big roles offshore. So you've got to show the bridge of why that experience is relevant and how it can help your prospective employer in the New Zealand market. Otherwise, people might be reticent to approach you if the roles seem to be way smaller than what you've done before. So you've got to change the narrative, control the narrative.
Thank you. Should I pick out maybe just a couple more for us to finish off? Someone has asked, should I disclose ADHD?
Well, I'll comment on that one too. I've coached people with ADHD recently. So it's important to recognise people's neurodiversity. And what I've found coaching people with ADHD is that the ADHD comes with superpowers. And so you can articulate the superpowers. You don't necessarily have to label that they've come from ADHD. And then during the process, if you're late in the process in terms of advanced for being offered a job or shortlisted for the job, then I think it's useful to be upfront about the environment in which you're going to perform most effectively, and can the organisation support you with that. So it's there to enable neurodiverse people to flourish and succeed.
Thank you. Someone has said they've been with a company for 4 years and looking to branch out, but how can you best deal with the question of references if company policy is not to provide a reference?
I think so often a new organisation will accept a personal reference, and the hiring manager, your previous manager, might be able to write a reference from a personal perspective. I think also, if it's going to be an absolute no-no that you'll be able to get a reference from that employer, again, as we spoke about earlier, just tabling that with the recruiter right at the beginning of the conversation so that they can work around it. If you've got career history prior to your 4 years that you have been working with your current employer, then there's a possibility that you can go back to those previous leaders. Or if there are managers that might have left the organisation that you spent the last 4 years in that have worked closely with you, then that might be an option for you. But I think ultimately just disclosing that in the early stages of the hiring process so that it can be worked around and talked about will make it less likely to be an issue at the end of the process.
Thank you. We've covered off the vast majority of the themes coming through.
Great. Hey, thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciated you attending today's webinar. I hope that you've gained a lot from it. As I mentioned earlier, we will be recording, well, this has been recorded, and we'll be putting it on My Career Brand website for future reference. So go through and scan through if you like. We've referred to several of the tools that My Career Brand provides for coaching. If you're a client of My Career Brand, then those tools are available to you. If you would like to talk to anybody about career coaching and so on, then by all means do so. I'm just coming over to the screen now, or if you want to contact Nikki and Kirsty, those little QR codes there, you can scan them on with your mobile, and it will create an email or bring up an email that you can send. So we've got Gordon and Wendy and myself and Kyla from My Career Brand, and Kirsty and Nikki. So again, if you think you'd like to have a conversation about obtaining some coaching, get in touch, and we'll take things from there. My Career Brand. Right, thank you.